What is up, fantasy people? You are live with the True North Fantasy Pod, presented by Monkey Knife Fight. Of course, I am Trav, coming live from Dirty Laundry Studios 2.0. And of course, with me, as always, co-hosting, West Coasting, bringing the most. It is Tyrell McLaughlin. Ty, how are you living this fine evening, buddy?
I am living the dream, as always.
Of course. Yeah, it's good to get back in the lab, man. It's been a couple of weeks since we had our regular scheduled programming. We're sorry that we didn't have, our fulsome show last week. Full disclosure, 2 weeks ago, Ty, you know this already. We had our Wednesday show, and the following morning at 8:45, I had a baby. So it was a busy evening. I actually have I got to post that audio up. I've been super behind since the baby came. It's been super busy. Got to post that audio, but of course the video is on the tube. And shout out to my wife, actually, Ty, because she started having some contractions roughly 30 minutes into that episode. And, she knew how important it was for us to get the epi fired off. So she held it down until after. And then once the pod ended, it was kind of scramble time to get the other kids down to my mom's place and all of that jazz cabbage. But it worked out great. We had a healthy baby boy. He is doing great. He does not yet have a name, as is customary for us. But so that was pretty eventful a couple weeks ago. And then last week, we didn't have our regular show, Ty, but I do want to encourage everybody to go check out the YouTube channel because we got a crazy cool opportunity. Shout out to DAZN Canada as well for reaching out to us for this opportunity. But we interviewed Chuba Hubbard, buddy. So that was really, really cool. It was an unbelievable opportunity that came our way, so we obviously couldn't pass it up. So go to the YouTube channel and check it out. It was fun talking to Chuba. Hey, we just kind of fanboy style. It was cool. We actually got to interview an NFL player.
That was awesome. I tried to get some of the tough answers, didn't, but it was a pleasure. And he definitely is somebody who has his head on his shoulders. You know what I mean? And you always worry about that with some of these guys. But you commend a guy who's come through some adversity, or at least a hard path to get through when you think of guys coming from Canada and having to kind of go it alone in the States as a young kid. And for him to have this opportunity bestowed upon him last week was awesome to watch. And it's exciting going forward.
Totally, man. That is the definition of a good Canadian kid, if I have ever seen one, and ever the professional, even as a rookie, Chuba. So that was really cool to talk to him. And then another thing I do want to talk about, Ty, this is kind of a little bit on the sad note, but I feel like it needs to be mentioned. And I just want to give a little bit of love on our show because this guy is somebody who is an inspiration to everyone in our situations, coming from I guess obscurity and building up a podcast and building up your brand and stuff is something that we're trying to do. And so I just want to give some love to the Tagliere family. Of course, anybody who's in the fantasy community knows Mike Tagliere from Fantasy Pros did pass away within the last couple of weeks here due to COVID. And just want to show some love, man. It's been really cool to see the fantasy community come together. Everybody loved Tags. Everything that anyone had to say about him was positive and that he was a great influence on them. And just thoughts and prayers to his wife. I'll be honest, I tuned in. They live streamed the ceremony for him. And I was out and about that day, but I tuned in and I couldn't watch for too long because I was in a Tim Hortons at the time, Ty, and I tuned in and it was just really emotional. I didn't even know Tags at all, but just seeing his wife and seeing, the proceedings there, it got me kind of choked up. So I had to kind of take a breather on that. But big shout out to Mike's wife because she has been an absolute hero through all this. And just much love to them.
No, and I think that's what stood out about him was he was such a good guy, but he also did such a good job humanizing himself. Like I think we do feel attached to these guys we listen to every day for years on end, possibly if you're listening to him back, as long as he's been on the Fantasy Pros airwaves. And the guy really exuded everything that someone should in this industry. He was definitely a bright light in this industry. I also just lost a close friend of mine recently as well. So a lot going on, and it's just really cool that at least we can celebrate the circle of life with you having a fourth kid. So that's at least one thing that we can look at from a glass half full perspective. And obviously the GoFundMe page and stuff for Mike Tagliere speaks for itself, speaks to his character. So everybody should try to emulate guys like Mike Tagliere, like, Scott Fish, like Ryan McDowell, and all these people that we do hold most dear, even though we don't technically know them. It certainly feels like we do sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that GoFundMe page, just go to his wife's page at Tabby Talks on Twitter, TABBIE Talks on Twitter. And you'll find the GoFundMe somewhere on her timeline there, as well as the Fantasy Pros one as well. Definitely encourage anyone to go and help out, because it's definitely much needed for the family there. Ty, I'm going to fire off to you to get into the episode. But before I do, I just want to let everybody listening know to make sure that they check out all of the crew's work at TrueNorthFFB.com. We've got that shiny new website, and I just want everybody to go in and cruise around and check it out. And while you're there, make sure you check out the shop. Viridian Global always has us looking swagged out with all of the great merch that's over there. We're a part of the Viridian Global Football Collective, which is a bunch of fantasy football brands who have their merch through Viridian, and it is the best merch in the biz, 100%. So make sure you go to Viridian Global and check out all those brands, but we've got our stuff on the TrueNorthFFB.com site. And then lastly, just make sure you subscribe to this very channel, the TNFF network, and make sure you click that bell icon to get the notifications there. And actually, Ty, lastly is this: we are proud members, of course, of the Fantasy Points Media Group. So that is a group of podcasts that have come together via the Fantasy Points brand. Shout out to Ben for putting it all together. We actually hit the 6-month mark of the Fantasy Points Media Group, so that's really cool. And we're thankful to be one of the podcasts that's been included in that host of quality content. And just with that deal, we can get any of our listeners 10% off of the elite resources, tools, and analysis at fantasypoints.com. We've had Scott Barrett on the show plenty of times, and he is one of the many minds over there putting out some great work. Wes Huber has incredible matchup articles every week to get you dialed into every single matchup. Like, that is a crazy article that he puts out there. And all the other guys, like we've had an up-and-comer Jake Tribby on the show as well, and he does really, really good analytical work. So fantasypoints.com is just the best resources you can get. So if you want an extra 10% off the top, use our promo code 21TrueNorth10, all caps, and you can get 10% off of those elite resources and tools, which are already a really good deal. So if we can just shave a little bit off of the top to give you an edge to score more fantasy points, we would love to do that. So 21TrueNorth10 is that promo code. Okay, Ty, so what are we talking about tonight? Back in the lab, I'm excited, but why don't we tell the people what we're going to be covering?
Well, thanks to companies like fantasypoints.com, we have some of the tools and maybe arguably a large enough sample size to start analyzing some buys and sells at the what used to be the quarter mark of the season. But in a fantasy season, you don't have that long. There's teams that are 0-4, 4-0 and stuff. So we have a lot of hard decisions to make here at this point of the fantasy season. So we just thought we'd go through some of the more elite players or some of the more important integral players for fantasy rosters and go through what we should be doing with them and deciding if so-and-so player is a top 5 running back still. Is this an elite player going forward? Is this guy even a top 12 guy for a Stephon Diggs or something? So we're going to go through a ton, just a buffet of those kind of guys, and try and do some buy low, sell high kind of stuff, and try and pick apart some perceptions that might be coming into place at this point.
Yeah, I'm fired up, man. I'm fired up for this episode.
Well, why don't we start right away in quarterbacks? I'm going to do Jalen Hurts right off the top. He is a top 5 quarterback right now, the quarterback 3. Only Mahomes and Kyler Murray have scored more fantasy points than Jalen Hurts. He is 12th in attempts, 9th in passing yards, couple 300-yard games, 25th in completed air yards, but he is getting a ton of yards after the catch from his pass catchers, from his skill players. So what say you, Trav? Is he a top 5 quarterback going forward?
Yeah, I think he is. And I think that's going to continue because the offense is designed for him to get his passing game production that way. He's not just striking lightning in a bottle with all the after the catch yards from Devontae Smith. We got a little bit of Jalen Reagor action from time to time. Of course, Dallas Goedert is a after the catch beast. And I think the way that Sirianni and Shane Steichen have kind of designed the offense is it's going to run through that type of production. So I think that's going to continue. And then when you add what he's going to give you with his legs, we've talked about it, that this is one of those guys in the little bit of a later tiers of the drafts that you could have gotten as a top 5 upside quarterback play, and it's coming to fruition. And I think it's just going to continue because the offense is designed that way. They're not using the run game from the running backs that heavily. It's very spotty where that's concerned. Kenneth Gainwell, I think, is like top 5 in running back targets, and I think running back targets are just another way to insulate a young quarterback and help that production as well. So I think it's going to keep going for my Birds, man.
I thought, we were definitely, a lot of people were saying that the closest thing to 2019 Lamar, the closest thing to Josh Allen this year was probably Jalen Hurts, given the average draft position. And I agree that a lot of that yards after the catch stuff could continue. And if not, I think they could compensate with some more air yards, right? Just off play action. Jalen Hurts is like 5th in yards right now. I think he's completed 31 of 41 passes. So that's like over a 75% completion percentage. And he's over 10 yards per attempt on play action. And they have games against like Tampa Bay, Las Vegas, Detroit coming up. So there's some easy games after this Carolina matchup who, they just traded for, what's his name? Carolina just traded for Stephon Gilmore, but without some key players on that defense still. So
Carolina signed Stephon Gilmore?
I think they traded for
they traded for CJ Henderson from the Jags, and then Stephon Gilmore was just released by the Patriots today.
Oh, I thought Panthers signed him for some reason.
If they signed him, then great move, Panthers. I did not see that, but we will definitely catch up on that.
I don't know why. No. I thought they traded for him though, but anyways, they acquired Stephon Gilmore.
Okay, look at that.
Which, it's pretty good. Pretty good stuff for Carolina. But after Carolina, even if you consider it a tough matchup, which I think Jalen Hurts' legs can kind of transcend tough matchups, or the game script can help in tough matchups or whatever, Jalen Hurts can definitely be a top 5 guy going forward, I think.
Yep, count it.
Yep. Who is my next guy? I think it was Josh Allen, and he is the quarterback 7 right now, so just outside that top 5 range. Last year, he put up the 5th best fantasy season ever by a quarterback. Do you think he is a top 5 quarterback going forward, or do you think he's on that cusp kind of thing? Like, do you think we're going to see something in between the first 2 seasons and what we saw last year from Josh Allen for the rest of 2021?
Yeah, like I don't think we see full astronomical 2020 Josh Allen. But he is hitting his stride. He's had a couple of really good matchups the last 2 weeks, so that's helped. But I think that can just help his confidence in knowing that he can do a lot of the things that he did last year, this year. So I'm hesitant to say that he's going to go astronomical like he did last year, but I think putting him as a top 5 quarterback, I think I'm definitely doing that. We saw a red zone rush for a touchdown this past week, and that is something that's always in his arsenal. So I think it's with him hitting his stride, with the way that offense looks, with how we know they operate by throwing the ball a ton. I think it's going to be really nice for him, and lucky for them, the run game has actually grown some efficiency on some of that lower volume. So that's nice for the team overall. But I think Josh Allen is a top 5 quarterback for me rest of the season, just because of, I think he offers that quarterback 1 upside that you don't quite get with Jalen Hurts because of that air yards and the gun arm that he's going to have, right? So that's where he differs from Jalen Hurts, is that I don't think Jalen Hurts is going to be able to give you that astronomical season like Josh Allen did last season, just because Josh Allen is he does have a bit of a penchant for hucking it downfield, and he's got some great weapons to do so. So yeah, count it for Josh Allen as well.
Yeah, 2nd in intended air yards, 3rd in completed air yards. Buffalo is running a little bit less 10 personnel, a little bit less 11 personnel so far, but I think that might just be an anomaly. Like, it's still a lot. It's still a lot of 3 and 4 wide receiver sets. And they have a game against Kansas City. I expect to be a shootout this week. Miami, Jacksonville, the Jets are coming up on the schedule, the Colts. So they have some matchups they could either blow the teams out, or Josh Allen could really be involved in a shootout on offense with both teams. Speaking of which, Dak Prescott, somebody we expected a lot of shootouts for his team and for him to benefit immensely from them, with Kellen Moore calling plays in Dallas. So he's the quarterback 12 right now. Dak is 26th in air yards and intended air yards, one of the lowest air yards per attempt right now in all of football. He's 20th in attempts, but he's actually 11th in completed passes, 13th in passing yards. So we are seeing some of the efficiency, just not some of the deep passing prowess that we thought we might. So do you think the defense is a little bit better and that's going to prevent Dak from really going all out? Or do you think this is just a blip and we haven't seen the Cowboys hit their stride, including Dak?
Well, I think there's a few things at play there. The defense is definitely one of them. They have played far better than anyone would have anticipated. Trevon Diggs is incredible out on the corner. Micah Parsons has been great converting to defensive line since they needed it so
Crazy.
bad. Like, that's
Yeah,
super
one of the
cool.
best edge defenders in football right now.
Yeah, as much as I hate the Cowboys, like, I have to respect it, right? I'm a football fan overall, so that's what matters to me, right? And so, like you said, like and another thing that's at play is just they're doing a lot more two tight end sets. They have a lot more commitment to the run than they have in the past. To your point there, they're like 22nd as a team in pass attempts, 7th most rushing attempts as a team, and they have the 2nd most rushing yards as a team. So it's just a renewed commitment to that run game. They've unlocked a little bit of Tony Pollard. So I think they're like, shit, we got two pretty good players back here. Let's use them and insulate that quarterback that's coming back off of a devastating leg injury. So I don't think Dak is a top 5 quarterback going forward for me, just because we're not seeing that volume. And if the running game, if they had the same rushing volume and it hadn't been effective, maybe I'm a little bit more on board, because they would obviously be water and try to adjust a little bit, but it's been effective for them, man. And playing defense and running the ball is always a good recipe. And so I think they're going to try and go a little bit more towards that route, which is unfortunate for us as fantasy gamers, because we love that aired out offense. But I think the fact that they have 2 quality tight ends, Michael Gallup's injury is probably a factor in that as well, because with him as the third fiddle, they probably would be having those 3 wide receiver sets a little bit more. So just a renewed commitment to heavy formations and the run, and Dalton Schultz is balling out.
Yeah. No, I think we could see like a little bit more of the wide receivers getting involved here, CeeDee Lamb and Amari, pretty soon. Like over 60% of Dak's passing yards in 2019 came via air yards, and that's down to, about 50% since then. So definitely a little bit of a change in the offense, but still like 190 completed air yards was his average in 21 games under Kellen Moore heading into this season, and he's about 125 completed air yards per game right now. So I expect a big uptick from Dak, but I do agree that the offense is changing a little bit, or has changed, and the defense is a big part of that too. I want to go through a couple guys, and I want to ask if you think they're QB1, so top 12 guys going forward. And maybe I'll start with 1 or 2 rookies here. What about Trey Lance, Trav?
Ooh, he's right on the cusp, I think. Like, we saw some inaccuracy coming in, but that's to be expected as a rookie. And I think just the offense is going to provide him opportunities to still be a good fantasy scorer, even if his box score numbers aren't massive. He did have 2 passing touchdowns last week, and I think he had 7 carries for 41 yards or something like that. So that's 4 extra points that he's got on the ground, with an offense kind of like the Jalen Hurts offense. It's predicated on a lot of after the catch work and just scheming guys wide the fuck open. And I think that's going to really help Trey Lance, just being in that offense. So I think he's right on the cusp. It'd be hard to say he's a bona fide top 12 option with not seeing a ton of him. But I'm just kind of hedging on this one, Ty. Let's fuck it. Sure. He is a back end top 12 quarterback going forward, as long as he's starting, obviously.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, he has the tools that are so conducive to fantasy success with that deep ball in the scheme, and with the legs, like what he adds athletically, of course. And like, if we knew that Trey Lance was starting the rest of the season, I would easily have Buddy as a top 12 quarterback, I think, nice. For fantasy rest of the way. A lot of it has to do with that strength of schedule too, like the fantasy strength of schedule that we talk a lot about. They get the Bengals, the Falcons, the Titans, and then Houston, the Texans in fantasy championship week. So that's a really, really sexy schedule. And I just think, the deep work will come. I think it has a lot to do with what I talked about with the other quarterback there, and that's play action. Like, Trey Lance has completed 3 of 7 passes that he's had on play action. 2 of those 3 completions have gone for a touchdown. He's averaging over 13 yards per attempt on play action. And a couple of years ago, that was the big catalyst to Jimmy Garoppolo, getting the 49ers to the Super Bowl in 2019. He put up 1,667 passing yards off play action. Since 2012, only Josh Allen has put up more yards in a season off of play action per PFF. So I really like Trey Lance, and I've just been waiting for him to get in there. And I think they've kind of been waiting to get him in there. Like, I don't know if Jimmy Garoppolo is that hurt or if this was just bound to happen come their bye week, which is next week after this week, I think, for the 49ers. What about Justin Fields, who has 0 top 24 finishes in his young career so far? Is he a top 12 guy?
Same amount of touchdowns thrown, actually. I can't say that he is. I have, Ty, I've been all aboard team Justin Fields, but we just haven't really seen it. And I think what Trey Lance has that Justin Fields lacks is the situation, right? And I personally was of the mind that Justin Fields was going to transcend that situation, but he's just not getting it. He doesn't have the offensive line that Trey Lance has. Apparently he doesn't have the weapons. I mean, Darnell Mooney and Allen Robinson are great, but they just haven't been able to click it into scoring points. I think he can probably turn it around and we could see some top 12 weeks, but I think rest of season top 12 is really hard for me just because this team's in a bit of disarray with that offensive line. David Montgomery's hurt now. He's out for probably a couple of weeks. Damien Williams obviously was a hot waiver pickup this week, and Khalil Herbert to some extent as well, but I just have a real hard time seeing it. Like Justin, like the legs is what keeps him useful, but even that, like his last 2 weeks have not been useful. And trust me, I started him in a couple of spots because I wanted that upside and I just didn't see it. And so I think the situation is hampering the quarterback in this situation where, it's not necessarily for Trey Lance.
And situation also involves offensive line, which has been really bad under Justin Fields. While he's been in there. Per Sports Info Solutions, Baker Mayfield 8.8% sack percentage, Ryan Tannehill 9.6%, Davis Mills 10.1%, Zach Wilson 10.1%, Justin Fields 17.1%. Like it's just astronomical right now. So obviously that won't sustain, but still a very putrid offensive line in Chicago. And yeah, like you mentioned with losing David Montgomery for an extended period of time, maybe that forces the Bears' hand to let Fields cook with his legs, but we just have so little faith in this offense with the play calling that this offense could, dip into bottom 5 territory. Even though, they're already there, like they're the 3rd lowest scoring offense. I think now they're scoring like 16 points per game on offense, but I think they're like dead last, just over like 100 yards passing per game, which is just laughable. The good news is though, Trav, like Fields and the bad news Bears, like they get the Raiders this week and Las Vegas giving up over 325 passing yards to quarterbacks this season. So this could be big emphasis on could be the chance to get in on Justin Fields for free, I think is all I'm saying. Like, once he does have a blow up game or he breaks off a couple long runs, I think the price just goes way up for Justin Fields because he is one of the fastest, most athletic quarterbacks to come into the league in a long time. He's kind of on that next level, I think, athletically.
Yeah.
So, the Raiders this week, it's interesting because it actually does get kind of tough after that. But Detroit week 9, I think will determine Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace's fate as they head into their week 10 bye. I just hope they lose to the Lions so badly in that game that both these guys get fired and we have a fresh slate in 2022 with Justin Fields.
Wow.
What about Sam Darnold, Trav? How real is this Sammy D business?
It's fucking extra real, Ty.
He's the quarterback 5 right
now. And he's the, to say that he's a top 5 quarterback going forward would be a little bit of a stretch, but top 12, I think absolutely. And not patting myself on the back by any means, but like it's kind of like what I thought was going to happen with this offense is that offense that Matt Rule and Joe Brady have installed with the pieces around him is just I've said quarterbacks being insulated a lot on this show, but like that is the situation that is insulating Sam Darnold. And he's been unlocked a little bit. Like he's played really well. He's been put up good passing numbers. More importantly, he looks like Lamar Jackson rushing for touchdowns out there. Like I think he's got 5 rushing touchdowns on the season and
matches his career.
Yeah, and he's not, he's not lightning fast by any means, but he's deceptively quick, you know what I mean? And he picks his spots pretty well, and he just gets in the end zone. He's got a pretty big body. He can kind of bang a little bit if he has to, and Sammy D is in the house, you know what I mean? I like it. I think it's cool because it's like a really cheap option that's now putting up big numbers. And, if you were going in on Sam Darnold, I don't think you were going in on Sam Darnold as much as you were going in on that Carolina Panthers offense. And it's just paid off. And so I'm super, super happy. And I think it's going to continue for the rest of the season with Sam Darnold producing top 12 numbers.
Yeah, but he looks like Burrow at LSU under Joe Brady there. And like Matt Rule and Joe Brady are both good at scheming quarterback rushing. I'm not saying that it's not, bizarre that he has 5 rushing touchdowns after having like 5 in 38 games as a Jet. I'm just saying that they can scheme that up in close for sure. And without Christian McCaffrey there, why not give it a shot once in a while? Yeah. With Sammy D, when you got the scheme to do it. So I really like it. And you mentioned the weapons are just off the charts. I think Sammy D's got the 6th most yards after the catch from his array of weapons this season. And I think, he has room to obviously experience regression when it comes to those rushing touchdowns, but he has a 3.4% touchdown rate, which is one of the lowest. It's bottom 10 in the league. So he could actually experience some regression to the mean in the touchdown column, passing the ball. So I think Sammy D definitely has top 12 upside. Would you take Sam Darnold or Trey Lance rest of the season then?
Give me Sam Darnold. Give me Sam Darnold just for the certainty of him starting, and we've already seen it, right? Rookie lumps happen, and I think Sam Darnold's just in a good situation. So give me Sam D.
Mm-hmm. So the other guy in New York still is Daniel Jones. He's the quarterback 6 right now. His only game below 21 fantasy points actually came against the Falcons, who just bleed fantasy points to quarterbacks. Second in the NFL in completed air yards through 4 weeks. He's got an over 9 average depth of target, and he's one of 3 quarterbacks with multiple 50-yard touchdown passes. So what say you, is Daniel Jones a top 12 quarterback?
He might be. He might be. I don't think so. Like, I wouldn't put cash money on it or anything like that, but he's producing to the point where it's hard to ignore him in that range of the quarterback ranks, right? These weapons have produced better than we expected. We'll talk about him in a little bit, but Saquon Barkley is hitting his stride a little bit here, and Danny Dimes is making some decent decisions. Like, I rewatched the condensed version of that game on our friends DAZN, of course. And he was dealing in the second half. He looked like shit in the first half this past week, but he was dealing a little bit in the second half. Kenny Golladay was getting involved. Kadarius Toney got some targets. So I think, like, with Sterling Shepard potentially coming back from injury, getting a little bit of Darius Slayton back, I think this offense is suddenly looking decent. So Danny Dimes could do it. I'm not saying that he will do it, but good for him for making himself useful.
Yeah. And Daniel Jones has an even lower touchdown rate than Sam Darnold, 2.8%. It's like the 5th lowest, minimum 100 attempts so far. And I also think the Giants and Danny Dimes could just improve in close big time. He has just 7 attempts into the end zone this season, which is a very low number as it is, especially in relation to where he's scoring in fantasy right now. But Jones has 0 touchdown passes on those 7 attempts. And every other quarterback with 5+ end zone throws has a touchdown. And kind of ridiculous how bad the Giants have been at getting to the red zone and scoring once they're in the red zone over the last 2 years. That goes back to 2020 as a big area they need to improve. Actually, both teams from New York are just, the worst when it comes to getting to the red zone and scoring touchdowns once they get in the freaking end zone. But I think you also look at that tough strength of schedule. So Danny Dimes, I definitely am a little bit squeamish. I think we could actually get some low weeks coming up, but especially when you look at the Rams, the Panthers, matchups like that. So definitely a little bit more pessimistic on Daniel Jones than Sam Darnold, that's for sure. Aaron Rodgers is somebody that I've been very pessimistic in back-to-back off seasons. I was super wrong heading into 2020. I feel a little bit more vindicated in 2021. What say you? Is Aaron Rodgers a top 12 quarterback, or are those days over?
I think those days are over. I think you're going to get some spike weeks because that's just what he does. He'll give you that 4-touchdown pristine game where he just dirt naps the other team. But I don't think he's going to give you that consistency because there is talk about a team that is committing to the run. The Packers are doing just that. Both Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon had 15 carries this past week. So that's 30 totes between those 2 running backs. That is a heavy load of rushing. And so I think, I think it's just going to be spotty from week to week, and we can't expect that other world consistency. And he's not going to be putting up those 40+ touchdowns like he did last year unless he just lights the league on fire for the rest of the season. So I do not think Aaron Rodgers is that dude anymore. How about you?
No, he doesn't add with his legs.
Yeah.
No, like he just doesn't add with his legs, right? Like, and then the age thing is something I talked a little bit about this offseason. Like, no quarterback has ever scored 350 fantasy points after the age of 37. He was one of just 3 to ever do it at the age of 37, like he did last year. But also just like a really tough strength of schedule, and the touchdown regression was just obvious, right? It always is. I know he's literally like one of the best touchdown rates post NFL merger in NFL history, but it was still just ridiculous last year. And that's what happened last year is everything came together for Rodgers. Like, he had the best pass protection. He had the most touchdowns by far, most touchdowns off play action by a mile, the most 40-yard touchdowns. He had the most fantasy points in the red zone. Like, he just end zone touchdowns, deep ball touchdowns. Like, it was just, and then you look and you're like, how the fuck was he not even the quarterback 1 overall in fantasy? And you're like, oh yeah, he adds nothing rushing. Like, it's a really tough sell. I think he was super reliant on touchdowns, the least sticky metric, and he has literally hit the age apex cusp or cutoff or whatever. And, just the offense in Green Bay plays slow. They run the ball a lot and they look like a run first team schematically. And there's just not enough volume to compensate for the downtick in what was historic efficiency last season. And then just not adding the rushing. So he can just, get out of my face, I guess. Because he's still got that name recognition, I would say.
Yeah, well, and I think like a lot of that is because he's previously had to put this team on his back to get them anywhere, right? And he has done so time and time again. But I think what we're seeing is that the team is trying to take that team off of his back and kind of put it on the coaching staff and the other personnel. And I think it might be a good thing for the team down the stretch, to be honest with you. But I just think Aaron Rodgers just isn't it for fantasy anymore. So I think that was very well put, Ty. So being that we're talking about Mr. Discount Double Check and the fact that he's probably not getting his belt this season, Ty, I want to talk about our friends at Trophy Smack real quick, because if you want to level your league up, go to Trophy Smack. Our promo code TNFF will get our listeners a free championship ring with the purchase of a championship trophy or one of these shiny championship belts right here, Ty. For our video listeners, obviously our audio listeners can't see this, but make sure you guys go subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can check it out. I am holding my Kings Classic championship belt right now that was sent to me by Bob Lung and the folks with the Kings Classic. You can get custom graphics on here. We've got the logo. It says the league that I won was the auction, and it's got my name down there. And this thing has some weight to it, Ty. You've seen it. It's pretty hefty. It feels great when you're rolling around with it on the shoulder. Feel pretty badass, and I can't wait to take this to some of my drafts next year. Especially my live draft is just going to be off the hook when this comes. So that's just a personal story of me leveling up my fantasy game, and I want our listeners to do that too. So like I said, go to trophysmack.com, check it out, use our promo code TNFF. You get a trophy or you get one of these fancy championship belts, and you get a free you get yourself a free championship ring with that too. So not only can you have the strap, you're going to have the bling on your finger as well, and you can just crush your league mates' dreams before the draft is even complete, right? Like you don't even, you have that mental warfare on lock by the time the draft is even over when you roll up with one of these. So thanks to our friends at Trophy Smack. This belt is absolutely incredible. It is going to be a staple in the backdrop for the pod, of course. That promo code is TNFF. Okay, so now that I've put the strap back, Ty, I'm going to get us into some of these running backs. Lots to cover here. It's been a bit of a massacre at the running back position, Ty. So this is going to be a really good reset for us going forward for the rest of the season, because it might have been massacred, but I still maintain that running back is the most important position for fantasy football. And we're going to start in the dog pound, Ty, with a couple of dogs in Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. We talked about it a little bit when the Jarvis Landry injury came down, and that the Browns were going to lean heavily on the running back position with those two guys in the backfield. And I think we're seeing that with Kareem Hunt is actually the running back 8 right now, and Nick Chubb is the running back 11 in PPR formats. We've got Nick Chubb as number 2 in the league in rushing. Kareem Hunt's actually number 16, and we saw him as kind of the pass catcher, but he's still getting that rushing work and being very efficient on that. And since Jarvis Landry went down in week 2, actually, they're both top 20 in carries. So the rushing volume has been heavy for these guys. Just to pepper in a little cherry on top, Kareem Hunt is actually also top 15 in targets since week 2. So do you think these guys can keep it up all season? Jarvis Landry is coming back in a couple of weeks, Ty. Do you think, though, that we're going to get to, say top 10 running backs, top 12 running backs out of this Browns backfield?
Yeah, I think it'll be close. And how they get there is definitely the harder question to answer. But I'm definitely valuing both of them. Like I'm valuing Chubb as an RB1. I'm valuing Hunt as an RB2 right now in my weekly rankings. And both will be top 15, top 20 guys almost every week. But we have to know what we're getting from both of them, right? Like I think it's pretty amazing that they're scoring almost 40 points per game in PPR from the running back position in Cleveland. Like the Titans rank second under 35 points per game. And yeah, Cleveland is scoring twice as many PPR points compared to 1/4 of the league right now. It's just incredible. Winning by running. Who knew? The problem is that we do have to split it between two guys pretty heavily. Like Chubb has been a top 24 running back in just 2 of 4 weeks. Hunt in 3 of 4 weeks. Chubb has also been a top 12 running back in both instances. He was a top 24 back. Hunt has only been a top 12 running back once this season, and both have had one top 5 performance through 4 weeks. So these aren't necessarily league winning assets either. And even Demetric fucking Felton got in the mix in week 2, right? So he was the RB19 or something that week. So Nick Chubb is still the back I want, but neither guy has like spectacular floors either. You know what I mean? And just that league winning capacity feels a bit capped so long as everybody in that backfield is healthy. But yeah, should be, top 20 guys. Kareem Hunt could always get used more in the passing game. We definitely believe that should be the case. So it's nice to see that since week 2, it has been a little bit of an uptick in that department. Because Kareem Hunt is really good at football, right? Like among qualified running backs on RotoViz, he ranks top 5 in yards per carry, in target share as well. He's 3rd in fantasy points over expectation. So kind of transcending that situation. That's already a juicy situation. He's 3rd in fantasy points per touch among running backs with at least 40 touches. So, and in the passing game, like the yards after the catch per reception is off the charts, averaging over 10 yards after the catch per reception. So, you just see that Hunt is a back that would just smash anywhere he was. And then you add on that Cleveland is one of the best situations. I think they're 3rd in yards before contact. And they're one of the run heaviest teams in all of football. I don't expect Jarvis Landry to change that very much. So you have to know that you don't have a lot of top 5 upside with these guys, but on any given week, these guys could be top 12 guys, one or the other or both.
Yeah, and I don't think Jarvis coming back necessarily is going to change the team volume overall, but I think it could potentially affect that target volume for Kareem Hunt. It's very interesting. Like I'm still not quite sure exactly what to think about Kareem Hunt going forward, just because they haven't really used him much in the slot. I thought he was going to get a lot more slot usage with Jarvis Landry going down, but they haven't really done so. They've kind of stuck with the wide receivers and the tight ends that they've had. So I'm curious to see if some of those shorter targets are siphoned a little bit to Jarvis Landry when he comes back, because they will have Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham back for the first time in a long time. And so I'm curious to see what Stefanski can do in that offense with 2 really capable wide receivers, not to dog on the other wide receivers, but I think they got a lot of youth and inexperience there. So I think the Browns offense overall is going to be just fine, but I am maybe a little bit worried about that target share for Kareem Hunt myself. I think you kind of nailed the question I was going to ask you. Who do you want rest of the season, Kareem Hunt or Nick Chubb? And you said Nick Chubb. And I think for that reason, I am leaning that way, just because I don't know if the targets are as stable as they might seem for Kareem the Dream. I just have a lot of faith in Nick Chubb, like breaking off long runs every single game. I think he's that good. I want both these guys over both Broncos backs, for instance. I want both these guys over Damien Harris, maybe Josh Jacobs, Miles Sanders. I'm pretty high on Kareem Hunt as well, even though I really like Nick Chubb too. Like, me, I'm down with a couple down weeks. Like I'm down with the down weeks as long as you're giving me those big weeks as well. 100%. And Kareem Hunt is that guy. Like you talk about Nick Chubb breaking off big plays, Kareem Hunt does it as well. He just makes dudes miss and look silly. So very well put on those guys. So Ty, these next guys, I want to do a bit of an elite check. So we are going to talk about some of these big top of the market names and talk about whether they're still elite options for fantasy football, because we've seen varying performances from some of them. We talked about Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. Let's talk about the other Aaron here, your boy, Aaron Jones. He is currently the running back 4 right now. Of course, he did have that big 4 touchdown week in week 2, which was over 40 PPR points. Aside from that, he has averaged about 11 to 12 points per game, though. And so with Aaron Jones, I think we knew he had maybe a little bit of that boomer bust in his profile, just because he's another one of those guys that breaks off huge chunk plays and scores touchdowns in chunks. But I'm curious, Ty, with that production profile, do you think he can put together some week-to-week consistency? Like, would you value him as that top 5 back for the rest of the season? And kind of talk about how you value him with that potential inconsistency as well.
Yeah, I think that the answer can be no and yes there. Like, no, I don't expect the week-to-week consistency. And yes, I do consider him top 5 running back. That is the state of the running back position, unfortunately, where Aaron Jones just offers you so much more efficiency than almost any other. And that was part of the concern with Aaron Rodgers, is what this team's looked like over the last couple of years is a very run-heavy unit, a run-first unit. They just haven't, gone out and done it that way. And I think the volume in the passing game might be what we're missing, where he can get that week-to-week consistency. I thought he would be more used in the pass game. That's for sure. The volume just hasn't been there. But he's caught 13 of 14 targets, and 6 of those targets have come in the red zone, and 3 of those have gone for a touchdown. So we know Aaron Jones gets like very valuable high leverage work. And he's also 4th in red zone carries on that. No, just 4 of his 15, or sorry, yeah. So I think he has 15 red zone carries, 4th in the NFL, but he's only converted on 4 of those inside the 5-yard line. So that number could go way up. And we already know Aaron Jones is one of the best backs at scoring from anywhere at any time. So yeah, he's basically just a fantasy points machine. And this season's been no different. And he doesn't need that volume, right? He's top 5 in fantasy per touch, minimum 40 touches right now. So he just checks almost every box an elite running back does. Still taking guys like Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook over Aaron Jones, I guess, rest of the season. But I think Jones 100% belongs in that conversation.
Yeah, I'm with you as well. I think the massacre at the position has kind of played that into our hands, and I don't think you're really sitting Aaron Jones anyway. So I think that's well, like the targets too. Like he's one of those guys. Give him 3 targets a game, 4 targets a game, and he's going to be fine for fantasy football. So I think that was really well put there. We did see, I mentioned it earlier, Ty, AJ Dillon, the big Dilly bar, got 15 carries. Do you have any concern about him getting more involved? And kind of hurting that volume a little bit more, or do you think they can run alongside each other?
I think it's possible that in games where Green Bay gets up quick in the first half and they have a big lead in the second half, we could see a lot of A.J. Dillon playing cleanup duty, but I don't expect the Packers to be good enough to be doing that very often. I think they're going to need Aaron Jones a lot, and they're going to need to use him more in the passing game, I think, going forward too. But that is something that remains to be seen because they are a very structured offense as well. They define a lot of their roles and everything. So they definitely want AJ Dillon to be involved. They definitely don't want Aaron Jones playing 70+% of the snaps, right? So that's something we anticipated, but I think there is so much work to be had that both can definitely coexist. And I think that just hurts a little bit of Devontae Adams' upside maybe. But that was what we were saying going into the season, right? Like it was the passing game that had a lot of room to experience regression more so than the running backs, especially someone like Aaron Jones. So I think he's doing exactly what we thought he would do, and will probably continue to do that even through a pretty difficult strength schedule.
Totally. And I think some of that, what you were saying there, has been reflected in Robert Tonyan's standing as well. He's outside the top 25 in the tight end ranks. And I think that's where some of that regression has come. Robert Tonyan's really feeling that right now.
That's Robert Tonyan. Just wanted to make sure as we get into this next guy who is also very particular about the pronunciation of his name.
Yeah, totally. And I'll probably get it wrong, but whatever. And that guy you're talking about is Alvin Kamara. He is the running back 15 right now. And I'm actually going to start on Alvin, Ty, because I've got some opinions here. And I just think shit has changed for Alvin Kamara. And I'm not so sure he is that elite top 5 running back for us for the rest of the season. I think a lot of his upside has been changed with Jameis Winston coming in there. There is a little bit of good from like a rushing standpoint in that his carry volume is through the roof right now. He has the 3rd most carries in the league, which is not something we really expect from Alvin Kamara. And 3 of the 4 games this year, he has 20 carries. And previously in his 4 seasons of his career, he had only done that 1 time. So he's done it 3 times this season where he's had 20+ carries. And so that's just kind of
a really quick, Trav. Do you know that that 1 game before this year was week 16? It was the last game of last season. So he went his first 59 games of his career with 0 games with 20 carries. And now he has done it 4 of the last 5 games.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like it's definitely a shift for that offense, right?
And just the other one, like games with 5+ catches for Alvin Kamara, first 59 games. He did that 36 times in those last 5 games where he's had 20+ carries. He hasn't had a single game with 5 catches.
Yeah, so it's definitely changed a lot. And we thought that this offense was going to get a little bit more pass heavy, which would be a benefit for Alvin Kamara, being that behind, a healthy Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara was the second option there. And with Michael Thomas out, we thought he was going to be the first option there, but that has not come to fruition. Right now, he's, like you said, he's averaging less than 4 targets a game, and on a season, he's never been under 6. So that's a big worry for me. And another thing that just kind of happened this past week was the Taysom Hill red zone usage, which is another big worry, because I think if Alvin Kamara's targets are going to dip, we want him to make up for that with red zone work and those red zone carry touchdowns, right? Taysom Hill took a couple of those away this past week, and so that's rearing its ugly head for this offense again. And it's really hard for me to buy into Alvin Kamara as that top 5 back. I've got some teams that are leaning on him, and the carry volume has made him fine, but it hasn't made him, explosive for fantasy football like he has previously been. But what are you thinking? Are you still letting the AK spray as a top 5 running back, or you kind of in the same boat as I am?
I don't know. I do think he's still a top 5 running back going forward. I'm mostly leaning on the situation and just how extremely good it's been through some poor quarterback play. Like, they've just been the best team to attach to for the running back position in fantasy football for the last decade straight, and it's just not even remotely close. So I certainly think he's a buy high candidate. Like, Kamara's still second in total opportunities amongst running backs, like targets plus rush attempts. He's 5th in expected fantasy points. Like, the volume has been there for Kamara, something we've kind of had to do without, like you alluded to. And the concern is definitely that it's been a lot of rushing work, not as much work in the passing game. And that sucks for fantasy. Like, that stat I gave just kind of blows my mind about no games in the last, no 5 catch games in those 20 plus carry games, right? Like, he's just seeing either or. But I really do think the pass catching comes back. I just think the Saints have been able to dictate the pace and stuff early on. Like, hopefully the play volume and the pace of play on offense in New Orleans goes up as well. Obviously that team has had to deal with a lot, like kind of, moving around and everything. And I think Alvin Kamara is a much better player. So the ridiculously uncharacteristic margin between expected fantasy points and fantasy points scored over expectation for Alvin Kamara, I think should really correct. And all that's going to lead to a return to top 5 status. And maybe you can get Alvin Kamara for back-end RB1 prices right now. Like, probably not trading anybody we've talked about before, not giving up like Austin Eckler for Kamara either. But beyond those handful of backs, like, I'd trade Zeke for him. I'd trade Joe Mixon. Even maybe the next couple guys we'll talk about, I would trade straight up for Alvin Kamara. And he's still somebody I'm looking to trot out in DFS settings as well.
Yeah. No, well, I hope you're right, buddy. I really hope you're right. I got a lot of teams that are banking on that. I'm going to keep us moseying here, Ty. We're going to try and go a little bit quick through the rest of these running backs because I really can't wait to talk about these wide receivers as well. The next running back on the Darnell docket, though, is Saquon Barkley. He is the running back 10 right now. And he's seeming to hit his stride a little bit. The past 2 weeks, he's had his first 2 20-plus point performances, most of which Ty has been on the back of receiving work. So I want to know, are we in a place where we can trust Saquon as an elite running back producer, or is it more of a question of us trusting Daniel Jones in this offense at this point?
No, I think they're heaping the volume on him, right? Like, the Giants are really leaning on Saquon right now. They kind of have to with some of the injuries at wide receiver. But Saquon played almost 90% of the snaps last week. And over the last few weeks, he's gone from 50% of the team's carries to 67% in week 3 to 81% of the team carries this past week. So, and 17 and 21% of the team's targets over the last couple of weeks as well, which is really, really optimistic. We just really want him to be used in the pass game. And we know Saquon can really do damage in that facet of the game. Like, he's sitting at 10 yards after the catch per reception right now. Elite stuff. So bottom line is the opportunities are there. And it's just a few hangups, like I talked a bit about the red zone woes in the Big Apple when we talked Daniel Jones, but that definitely hurt Saquon Barkley. That RB1 overall status is hard to achieve when your team is only giving you like 50% of the goal line carries, right? And your team is so bloody rarely in the opponent's red zone in the first place. So and another thing I might want to monitor too is the Kadarius Toney. Like, he broke out this past week, and Buddy looked extremely ultra elusive. And there's some concern that manufactured touches that might otherwise go to Saquon could go more to Kadarius Toney going forward. So Saquon Barkley for me, like, I'll take him over those Browns backs we talked about, over Jonathan Taylor rest of the season. Top 10 running back for sure, but I have a hard time giving him that RB1 overall upside label at the same time because there is some stuff to nitpick still, and he could come with some down weeks.
Yeah, I think that's I think he's right in line with Kamara for me. I think they're very, very close. Like, I think you were saying that you'd probably trade him straight up for Kamara. I might be a little bit hesitant on that, to be honest with you. I might be a little hesitant. I like me some Saquon, that's for sure. The next guy, Ty, I want to know if you think that he is a new face among the elites. And I know this is going to be near and dear to you as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And that's Najee Harris, and he's the running back 7. Of course, he had that little 19 target number a couple weeks back. We like to see that for him. No huge rushing days just yet, but I think those are going to come for him. He does have the highest target share among any running back for his team, which is really cool to see for a rookie. Yeah, he's got a lot of room to kind of grow from a yards per touch perspective, from a touchdown perspective. He's only got 1 on the season. So what are you seeing as a Steelers fan? Do you think Najee is among the elites for running backs already?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the age-old debate. Like we said that this would be a tough go for Najee in real life, so to speak, but he's going to be an asset for fantasy because of volume, because of touches, because of how often he's going to be out there, and just the identity of the Steelers offense and how Mike Tomlin does this thing. So yeah, he plays on a bad offense behind a bad offensive line, and the quarterback play ain't getting any better. The release time ain't getting any longer, but all those things have kind of led to Najee Harris leading all running backs in targets. And like you said, 20% of the Steelers' targets as a rookie running back is pretty remarkable. And we know targets are worth 3 times as much as a carry in fantasy. So whatever you think of the offense in Pittsburgh, or even if you think Matt Canada has helped, or if the offensive line has improved or not, or gotten worse, what matters in this instance is the volume. Najee is top 5 in running back opportunities. Most importantly, Najee is top 5 in expected fantasy points. And now Najee has almost 50 PPR points over the last couple weeks. So I think he is certainly on his way, and he's somebody you're going to trot out there as an RB1 every week, and even target in DFS, hoping that those touchdowns start to pile up.
Yeah, bingo. Loving some Najee Harris. You just love to see it come to fruition for the rookies, especially the running backs who are drafted highly, right? You kind of want them to just break through that. And we're seeing it for Najee. So these guys are going to be rapid fires, Ty. And I want to know if you think these guys are top 15 for the rest of the season. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So this guy, the first guy here, James Robinson, the running back 8 right now. Is he a top 15 running back on a bad team for the rest of the season?
It's really tough. That's like right about where he is. I think this week the Jags have the Titans maybe. So he's going to be like a top 10 running back this week in my rankings. In a trade or thinking for rest of season, I would probably want like most of the sophomore running backs over him still, like Antonio Gibson, Jonathan Taylor, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, DeAndre Swift, all the sophomores basically. And they almost, that whole group forms like a big borderline RB1 tier. So wherever you want to slide James Robinson into that, fine. I really like James Robinson. He's doing a lot of the things that we knew he could do, because he's like 18th in running back opportunities, but he's really crushing over expectation. He's seen a healthy 13% target share, and he's really crushing in fantasy points per touch. He's over 1 fantasy point per touch, which is very impressive. And he's 7th in yards after contact per attempt on PFF too. So he's doing a lot of the things that prove that he's a good running back, and he's starting to get the volume. But Carlos Hyde should be back this week, so we'll monitor that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the thing for me. It's been nice to see him do it off of efficiency and not just volume, because that would have been something that people could have dogged him for if he came out and put up stinkers this year, was that he was a product of his volume last season. But he's the running back 8 on 54% of the team carries, where I think he was up with like an absurd like 80+% last season. So good for you, James Robinson. And I think he's, like you said, that big tier right on the cusp. Where does Chase Edmonds sit in that for you, Ty? He's the running back 13 right now, top 5 in running back targets. He's got a fairly healthy carry load when you look at him versus James Conner in that carry, or the Arizona offense, and that offense is just one we want right now as a 4-0 team.
Yeah, I'm really digging Chase Edmonds. I don't know if there's a player I've gone and sent more offers for this week than Chase Edmonds, and one of it is just when you look at the most yards from scrimmage without a touchdown in all of football, Chase Edmonds is dominating that. He has almost 400 yards from scrimmage yet to score a touchdown. Leonard Fournette's the only other guy in the league above 300 yards. Miles Sanders is 3rd with 274 yards from scrimmage without a touchdown. Chase Edmonds has the floor. He's just yet to have that ceiling because he hasn't scored a touchdown. He's top 24 in all 4 weeks, but he's yet to finish as a top 12 running back. So one of the highest yards per carry in all of football. I think Arizona's top 5 in yards before contact as well. So he's very efficient in a very good situation. And Edmonds is top 5 in targets as expected among running backs. And I think the Cardinals' situation is just even better than we anticipated for a running back. That offense is even more potent than we expected. So really happy to see what's happening with Chase Edmonds. And he's playing about 2/3 of the snaps right now, way more than James Conner. The problem is just that touchdown upside is kind of low. Like there's regression coming. Buddy will score a touchdown this year, but James Conner did get 75% of the team's goal line carries this past week. And we know Kyler Murray is a major factor inside the 5 as well. But I think Chase Edmonds is a big buy at mid RB2 prices. I want all those sophomore running backs ahead of him in theory, but even James Robinson probably ahead of him as well. But I want him over Miles Sanders. I want Chase Edmonds over Josh Jacobs even. So definitely a mid running back too. And I feel like the big weeks are coming for Chase Edmonds.
100%. He's just another one of those guys that doesn't need a ton of volume to be super explosive. And that's an offense that we're attaching to. So I think a lot of it there with those other guys is like, you might take Chase Edmonds over some of those other guys if you want to attach yourself to that offense more so than some of the others. So, good for him for inserting himself. And I was really worried about the volume with James Conner coming in, but he has proven me wrong in Chase Edmonds. So that's really good to see. These last two, I'm going to fly past these because Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the running back 18 and Jonathan Taylor at the running back 20. You already said they're probably at like the top of that tier with those borderline top 12 guys. I really want to get your take on this last guy that I've got, and that would be Cordell Patterson, the running back 2 on the season right now. Obviously, he was a lottery ticket for fantasy gamers, and he's just a bonus for your team that has, he's held up a couple of my teams. But do you think Cordell Patterson can actually keep this up? Like, obviously, this efficiency is unsustainable, but do you think he can keep up some sufficient like running back 2 flex ability for the season, or do you think it's kind of dreamland?
No, I think he's the perfect RB2 flex guy, right? Like especially if you have a consistent RB1 in your lineup, or if you're behind in a matchup or whatever, Cordell Patterson is the guy, but he definitely needs to increase some of his snap share and things like that, right? But he's getting used so much like a wide receiver in certain instances that he has such high upside, and obviously, the points aren't going to continue. Like I've been citing fantasy points per touch among running backs with 40 touches. James Robinson was at 1.03. DeAndre Swift is at 1.07. Aaron Jones, 1.1. Go up to Austin Eckler, who's second at 1.24. Cordell Patterson, 1.85. So he's just like completely dominating there. And that's just a big area of regression. Like he won't finish like above 1.25. So Cordell Patterson, somebody that is going to come down eventually, but with David Montgomery, with Mike Davis kind of not living up to expectations, and nobody else really threatening to get some of that pass catching work, especially with Russell Gage out and stuff like that. There is a lot of room for Cordell Patterson to improve his, see more work basically, and then he can compensate for a dip in whatever not scoring 3 touchdowns every week.
Yeah. No, that's really nicely said. Like I said, he's just kind of that lottery ticket guy who's getting some really, really effective volume right now. And it's cool to see him unlocked because we've been waiting for it for like 10 years, it seems like.
Yeah. Shout out to Ian Harditz. And we didn't even say, RB1 son when we were talking James Robinson.
That's right.
But James close to RB1 son right now. Jonathan Taylor, really quick. I just wanted to mention, it's just so interesting that Marlon Mack has come back into the fold. I think that's really pissing everyone off, and it should, he was down below, I think 50% of the team's carries for the first time last week with Marlon Mack back in the mix. He also, JT was dealing with a knee injury, but speaking of injuries, like that's kind of been what's happened where this offense has just deteriorated in Indianapolis because of injuries, especially along that, projected top 5 offensive line. So a lot of things are just working against Jonathan Taylor. But I think there's also some room to spot some easy regression coming up, especially when you look up this upcoming schedule here. I was looking at, he gets the Texans twice, the Titans, the Jets, and the Jaguars. Those are 5+ matchups over the next 9 weeks leading up to the Colts late week 14 bye. But Jonathan Taylor leads the NFL in red zone carries with 19, 0 touchdowns on his 19 red zone carries, leads the NFL in goal line carries, 0 goal line touchdowns. Just insane stuff. And he's going to score a lot of touchdowns really soon, probably against teams like the Texans, Titans, Jets, and Jaguars.
Yeah, that sounds like incoming pay dirt, folks. I like it. Ty, you're going to dive into these wide receivers. We're not going to get into a game of I got 5 on it this evening just because I want to get into the rest of the show. But big shout out to our friends at Monkey Knife Fight. They have the best player prop games in the industry. And with our promo code TNFF, you can get an instant match on your first deposit of up to $50. Spend 50, get 50, play with a cool hundy, and you are on Monkey Knife Fight stacking cheddar. We're going to be diving into the Thursday night matchup this week that pits the LA Rams against the Seattle Seahawks. Just a quick line for the people. Matthew Stafford has a line of 305.5 passing yards, and Russell Wilson has a line of 270.5. I would be inclined to hit the more option on both of those. And so that's just kind of a glimpse into some of the cool stuff you can get into on Monkey Fight. Again, that promo code is TNFF, and that gets you, that'll double your first deposit of up to $50. So cash in with Monkey Knife Fight because we're doing so ourselves.
Whew. Absolutely. And if you've been hitting the over on Cooper Kupp, you have been getting paid. So Cooper Kupp's the first guy. I want to go through some of these wide receivers who have pretty defined roles, but at the same time they've been blowing the F up in fantasy. They're top 5 guys, and I want to know if that's a perception we should attach to these guys going forward. And Cooper Kupp is that first guy because of our adoration we've shown Cooper Kupp on this podcast.
Yes.
So our boy Cooper Kupp is the wide receiver 1 overall right now. He is first in targets and touchdowns amongst wide receivers, 21st in the air yards, but he is seeing over 1/3 of the Rams targets. So what say you? Is Cooper Kupp a bona fide top 5 wide receiver? And is that at the expense of Robert Woods?
Signed, sealed, delivered. I am yours, Cooper Kupp, because there's been no fantasy asset that has made me happier than Cooper Kupp and what he's been doing with this Rams offense. I definitely think he has capped Robert Woods. He has 21 more targets than does Robert Woods, with 46 has Cooper Kupp, and then Robert Woods only has 25 targets on the season. So I think some of that has come along with the involvement of your Van Jeffersons and then maybe a little bit of Deshaun Jackson in the passing game, but definitely sucks for Robert Woods. But Cooper Kupp, man, he is kind of the do-it-everything guy for Matt Stafford. The chemistry is there. It is super legit, and I think given health, Cooper Kupp's going to maintain this throughout the rest of the season. Interesting note that could be an effect for Robert Woods is that the play volume is way down for the Rams. They're not, I think they're bottom 10 in both pass attempts and rush attempts. So the play volume is down, which is partially why we see that big target percentage for Cooper Kupp that has been to the detriment of one Robert Woods. So I think Robert Woods, you're probably looking at him as one of those top 24 guys that's going to give you some spike weeks and some down weeks. But I think Cooper Kupp is that guy that's going to be giving you those consistent 15 plus point per game finishes and rocking out as a top 5 wide receiver, baby.
No, I don't see why it couldn't continue. Like he's led the league since, if you go back to 2019, the most yards after the catch by a wide receiver is Cooper Kupp. And I think the touchdowns are the thing that people worry about, but all 5 of his touchdowns have come inside the red zone already. And according to PFF, Cooper Kupp leads in red zone targets this year, and over 1/3 of his team's targets is what he's getting in this nice offense. Like if the play volume goes up, a 30%, 33% market share is just off the charts, right? With the best quarterback play that Cooper Kupp's ever had in one of the best schemes in football, right? So, and over 1/3, like 1/3 of the targets are going to Cooper Kupp, and over 1/3 of his targets are coming inside the red zone. Like that is appetizing stuff. And like I said, like who cares about the ADOT if the guy leads the NFL in yards after the catch for the last 3 seasons, basically. So yeah, I don't see why this can't continue. And I think Robert Woods definitely has a lot of upside as well going forward. The next guy, Trav, another low ADOT wide receiver who also excels after the catch. In fact, since 2019, this guy is the leader in yards after the catch per reception. He's also top 10 across the board among wide receivers, except in air yards. But he's straight up consistently averaging more yards after the catch per reception than he is air yards per target. And that is Deebo Samuel. The thing is, though, Trav, Deebo has done all this with Jimmy Garoppolo. And it's possible we're entering the Trey Lance era. So do you think Deebo Samuel is a top 5 wide receiver going forward? And do you think that's still true if it's Trey Lance at the helm?
I don't think he's a top 5 wide receiver going forward because I am still of the mind that the Brandon Ayuk resurgence is going to come for fantasy football. And I just don't think Deebo can necessarily keep it up. Like he is top 5 in the league in targets right now, which I don't think we would have said that for any San Francisco wide receiver, let alone Debo being the one that we would have said would have been that high as far as target volume. So I don't think it's going to come crashing down because of what he does after the catch. And the fact that, he makes it happen and he can find the end zone. Lots of big plays from him this season, but, he still only has one red zone target on the year. This isn't a team that throws the ball in the red zone a ton. And I don't think that's going to change necessarily with Trey Lance. And with Trey Lance is going to come more deep work. We've said it all offseason, Ty. You've been pounding that table that Trey Lance is how they can unlock this offense. And if they do, I don't think that's great for Debo. Because, while he is good down the field and in contested situations for his size, I don't think they're going to use him that way. I think Brandon Ayuk is still going to be the guy they use in that fashion, as well as a little bit of George Kittle. So I think Trey Lance is a little bit of a dip for Debo, but I think regardless of the quarterback, I think that dip was probably going to be coming at some point with the continued involvement of Brandon Ayuk as a really, really good football player,
Trav, what number is DJ Moore wearing these days?
Numero 2.
Number 2? I wasn't sure if it was 2 or 4. Okay, so this doesn't work as a great segue then. But he is the wide receiver 4 on the season, Mr. DJ Moore. Cannot get some, man. But DJ Moore is seeing 35% of the team's targets right now. Do you think he can keep up this production that he's put up through 4 weeks?
Well, I think Christian McCaffrey being out for a couple more definitely helps him in that. I think what we've seen, though, is he has, pulled away from the pack as the alpha in this offense. My Terrace Marshall expectations have not come to fruition. I thought he was going to be way more involved, to the point where I thought he was going to be the second fiddle behind DJ Moore and kind of challenging DJ Moore for the alpha role in this offense. But that hasn't come close to happening. And then Robbie Anderson has been super inconsistent for fantasy gamers as well. So I think there's only really going to be one elite option in this offense for now, and that's going to be DJ Moore, because I think Sam Darnold and his rushing upside with the 5 touchdowns has been something that has cut into some of that additional receiver volume as well. So I think DJ Moore is going to continue this, and I think we just kind of have to shift our expectations on that, buffet of wide receiver production that we thought we would have in Carolina. I think it's kind of funneling more towards DJ Moore being the hog and the other guys being kind of ancillary. Not to say that it can't change, but I think when Christian McCaffrey comes back, it only plays further into having one main alpha wide receiver, and that's going to continue to be DJ Mo Money.
No, totally. And he's been a top 12 wide receiver in 3 of 4 weeks already this year. That's one shy of his total of 4 wide receiver 1 performances last year. And DJ Moore actually had just 7 top 12 outings in 45 games entering the season. He already has 3. Just crazy. Mm-hmm. Speaking of 3 already, DJ Moore could legit score more touchdowns this season than he has in the 3 years combined heading into this year. He's never had more than 4 touchdowns receiving in a year. And Darno ain't running in a pair every week. Come on. So DJ Moore just needs one more to tie his career high in touchdowns already. Speaking of career highs, Terry McLaurin, somebody we were hoping would reach new career highs. He is the wide receiver 6 in PPR right now. Been a bit boomer bust, barely scored 10 PPR points, finishing outside the top 24 in weeks 1 and 3 against the Chargers and the Bills, and then put up massive 27-plus point weeks against the Giants and the Falcons. So do you expect the same for Terry McLaurin going forward as a boomer bust option, or do you think he's a bona fide top 5, top 12 wide receiver? How do you see Terry?
I think top 12 for sure is how I see him. I don't think he has that top 5 upside. Taylor Heineke is a mobile quarterback who's going to use his legs. And we've seen him spread it around a little bit with J.D. McKissick getting more involved, Antonio Gibson still being involved there. So Terry McLaurin definitely is a top 12 option, but I think he kind of lacks the situation that could vault him into that top 5 for the rest of season. But I think he's going to be giving you some consistency. And then that's going to be to go along with some boom weeks. We saw that Logan Thomas got injured this past week, so it'll be telling to see how long that is for. I think that is helpful for Terry McLaurin, especially down when you're nearing pay dirt in the red zone.
And when Curtis Samuel's just coming back into the offense as well.
And so, I think it remains to be seen for me what Curtis Samuel is going to command. I don't think he's going to hurt Terry McLaurin that much, exactly, or how he's going to make his hay. But I think Terry's a top 12 option for sure. And if you can get him for prices less than that, then I definitely would be in on Terry McLaurin. If I'm just looking at some players here at the wide receiver position,
Like, if I
Anyway,
could just butt
that's
in.
a rabbit hole. Yeah, carry on.
No, totally. And if I could just butt in, like, I think it's hard to call him a top 12 guy in some people's eyes, especially if you own him because of those inconsistencies in back-to-back weeks, like weeks 1 and 3, and then great weeks every other week. You don't want that every other week crap. But, so he's not your typical wide receiver one. I'm saying we could experience some down weeks, but I think this season we are experiencing a bit of an atypical year, especially at the top of the wide receiver position. So wouldn't surprise me if he keeps going for sure, with Terry McLaurin being like a top 10 guy.
Totally. Yeah. I'd take him over Debo, like we were just saying. I don't think I would take him over DJ Moore, but I think I would take him over the Bucs receivers.
Nice. Well, I might get into a couple of those Bucs wide receivers. I want to hit some more of these guys. Brennan Cooks is the first guy I have, though, because he is the wide receiver 9 overall, number 1 in weighted opportunity on Rotoviz, second in air yards in the league. But his worst performance came last week. It was against the Bills, though, who have allowed the fewest fantasy points to wide receivers by a mile. But do you think Brennan Cooks is somebody we can trust every week as a top 12 guy?
I think it's going to be kind of tough. I think the division that he plays in and having that many matchups against those bad defenses is probably going to help him a little bit, with the Texans and the Titans being not very good at all. But I think it's really tough for me to say that he's going to be top 12 because he's not going to get good quarterback play. We were saying before that he's going to be serviceable due to volume, and I think that's still the case. But I think that, like, we have to switch our expectations on what serviceable is versus him being a top 12 option, right? I think serviceable for me, for Brandon Cooks, a reasonable expectation is a top 20 wide receiver, and I think he can be in that 14 to 20 area, but I don't see him maintaining top 12 numbers throughout the season just because Davis Mills is going to be so spotty and this offense is just going to be so spotty. And if he does, it's just going to be on the back of a bunch of ugly volume in garbage time.
Yeah, and I kind of share at the FF Aviator Bry Guy's opinion in the group chat that we can trust him as a top 12 guy. Point. Tyrod Taylor is back. With Davis Mills, I definitely think that's a tough pill to swallow. I'm willing to entertain that it was just a very difficult matchup that's been wide receivers against the Buffalo Bills this year. So very excited to see what Brennan Cook can do in week 5. But definitely, I'm really buying him before Tyrod comes back. Mike Williams is really tough. This guy is the wide receiver 5 overall right now. It's not just situation here. He's 14th in expected points per game on Rotoviz, but and he's seen some of the most valuable work in fantasy end zone targets. He leads the NFL in end zone targets. So, but like Brennan Cooks, he had 3 straight 22-point performances to start the season, Mike Williams, but he put up an absolute dud against the Raiders. So is that a sign for things to come, the regression that he's due to experience? Or do you think we could see like a boom or bust season from Mike Williams, which is kind of the definition of his career? Or is Mike Williams a wide receiver 1 going forward?
I think we're going to see a boomer bust plus season from Mike Williams. You know what I mean? Like he only got 4 targets in that dud that he just put up against the Raiders, but he can give you like 15, 20 points on just 4 targets. So I think it is going to be a little bit spotty, but I think that's kind of what we expected from Mike Williams. So this I think he's the wide receiver 6 right now, even after that dud. And so that's bonus. If we get a top 24 season from Mike Williams, I think you still got some ROI. So, but I think he can be a top 12 quarterback for the rest of the season because unlike Brandon Cooks, he has that stability at the quarterback position, a guy that's going to target him. We always thought, even when Justin Herbert was coming out, that Mike Williams might get a bit of a boost because he plays really well into the arm strength of Justin Herbert and him throwing some lasers down the field. And we've just kind of seen it happen for Mike Dubs where he's produced on those lasers that Justin Herbert is seeing. So it's going to be up and down, but I think we were talking a little bit of Aaron Jones, how sure he's going to give you some down weeks, but then he's going to give you those kind of 40-point weeks. I think Mike Williams is kind of like an Aaron Jones type at the wide receiver position. Maybe not like that wide receiver 1 overall upside like Aaron Jones has at the running back position, but I think he's one of those guys who's going to maintain that top production this year. But it's just going to be a little spotty from week to week.
Yeah, it's kind of what I was saying about the just sort of the volatility at the top of the wide receiver position and some of the ways that we might have to, like our wide receiver 1s are going to go about it. It might be a little boom or bust nature and throw Mike Williams in that mix, but definitely attached to Justin Herbert with this offense humming. I really like it. Speaking of a humming offense, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf in that Seattle Seahawks offense. Both guys are top 15 wide receivers. They are seeing well over half the team's targets. Metcalf is out targeting Lockett 33 to 25. Lockett is out producing DK 333 receiving yards to DK's 285. But Seattle is literally the slowest offense in football, dead last in plays from scrimmage right now. But at least they are averaging 6.6 yards per play. Only the Chiefs have been more efficient, but slowest offense in all of football. Especially with Tyler Lockett, do you expect this to be an either or situation from week to week with Lockett and DK, or are you still Lockett over DK? Because that's kind of my bigger question though. Is it one or the other, or is it both?
No, I think it's both, actually. I do think it's both. Just because DK is another one of those guys who needs 3 targets in a game, and he's gonna ball for you. And when you're giving him 7 to 10, I think that's just like huge production. I just think that he still profiles as the guy who's going to be a little bit spotty. So I would take Tyler Lockett just a hair above him. But you know what, Ty? Like, it's almost a coin flip for me at this point, because I think, like, my love for Tyler Lockett, I don't want it to necessarily cloud my judgment from a fantasy perspective. And I think we're kind of getting on the cusp of that maybe, but I think they're like right in line with each other to the point of being a coin toss. I could see either one outproducing each other. And I think they can have some week-to-week consistency. It might not just be like there's going to be one guy scoring you 30 points and there's going to be one guy scoring you like 12 to 16, you know?
Yeah, I think Tyler Lockett's somebody that I've never really changed my perception on. And if he's seeing 20 to 25% of the targets, he's a bona fide wide receiver too, in my eyes. You're just going to have to deal with some of the down weeks. But yeah, no doubt we've seen over the last couple of weeks that Lockett will give you some Debbie Downers because of the identity of the offense in Seattle under Pete Carroll. And I keep bringing up the low play volume because we know Seattle also wants to run the ball and control the pace, and that kind of makes it hard to support multiple wide receivers in any given week. And Lockett's 2 down weeks against the Vikings and 49ers here were DK Metcalf's 2 best games so far. And I talk about Lockett being dangerous for fantasy so long as he's seeing 20 to 25% of the targets. Like, DK Metcalf can maintain like a 25 to 30% market share. That's a recipe for a top 5 wide receiver season. I think given the quarterback he's attached to and the deep work and the work in the end zone that DK can command, like, to shine a light on what the play volume means for a wide receiver sort of here. DK has a 32% target share that ranks 6th amongst wide receivers, but 17 wideouts have more targets total than DK right now. So really frustrating stuff. And I think it is, like, in my opinion, a bit of an either or until the play volume can go up or the defense can get worse.
Yeah, for sure. I think where I was coming from was like, I would have a very hard time sitting either of these guys for any other option. Like, there's pretty few wide receivers that I'm going to be in a position on my team. Like, I'm obviously not talking about your DeAndre Hopkins, your Stephon Diggs, but like the way that teams are built, most likely you're not sitting a Tyler Lockett or a DK Metcalf is where I was at there. So that's definitely a very good summary of that situation though.
So let's rip up to the 7-11 in mini. Only one team has multiple top 12 wide receivers through 4 weeks, and it is the Purple People Eaters. Jefferson is the wide receiver 7, Thielen, wide receiver 11. Minnesota, though, Trav, is throwing the ball 62% of the time this year, up from 54% of the time last year. 69 nice plays per game, way up from 61 plays per game last season. What say you? Are both these guys top 12 wide receivers? And if not, who is? And where do you rank the other guy? Adam Thielen, obviously, everyone hates.
I don't hate Adam Thielen whatsoever. I think they are both top 12 wide receivers because it's still a decent funnel towards those two guys. I know KJ Osborne and Tyler Conklin have been making their names known in that Minnesota offense, but I think it's still the funnel to those two big dogs at the top. Adam Thielen's going to get it done on a double-digit touchdown season. Justin Jefferson's going to get it done on a big fat yardage season with a whole bunch of targets. So I think it can be done for both of these guys, and that increased passing volume just kind of allows for the continued involvement of Tyler Conklin and KJ Osborne while these two horses are still eating up at the top, if that makes sense. So I like it. And if you can, like Adam Thielen, you can get him low in your leagues. I guarantee you can get him for less than what he will produce for your roster because he has that, not sexy wide receiver profile to him, but he's going to put up good numbers for you. He scored a touchdown in the first 3 weeks, I believe, and last week was his first game of the season not to have a touchdown. He's just that guy for Kirk Cousins, and Kirk Cousins, we know he's an accurate quarterback. So I think it just all is going to shape up to those two still being dogs for fantasy gamers.
Agreed. And like, I just think Adam Thielen's just still seeing like the end zone targets. Actually, both guys have converted all three of their end zone targets according to PFF, and touchdowns this year, Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. But Thielen definitely really had a borderline monopoly on those on that high leverage work last season. So pretty crazy what Adam Thielen's been able to do in the touchdown department over the last couple of years. I expect that to continue. The efficiency, though, in this Minnesota offense and the pace, like I just expect the play volume to go down, and with that, the pass rate as well. And with all of that, the total pass attempts and targets to the wide receivers are going to go way down as well. And Dalvin Cook's been a bit banged up, so I think it's been a bit of a confluence of events for both these guys so far. But I definitely think Adam Thielen is a wide receiver 2 going forward, and Justin Jefferson's a borderline wide receiver 1 going forward. I think a lot of people would consider these guys closer to wide receiver 2 status than wide receiver 1 status. Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, who obviously have Antonio Brown to account for and Robert Gronkowski. So do you think they're both wide receiver 2s, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, are either wide receiver 1s, or is it a bit overrated owning any Tampa Bay skill player right now?
I think it might be a little bit overrated owning any Tampa skill player. I think that's a good way to put it there, Ty. I think they're both kind of comfortable, wide receiver 2, probably like top half wide receiver 2s. But all of these guys are going to be boom bust from week to week. In Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski included in that. Leonard Fournette's getting some targets as well, which is going to be kind of a thorn in that side. I think if anybody's going to be the wide receiver 1, it's going to be Chris Godwin, which is a change of my tune from the preseason. I thought the deep work was going to be pretty solid for Mike Evans in the offense, and that AB and Chris Godwin would kind of eat into each other. But I think we've seen that Tom Brady is loving targeting a healthy Chris Godwin. And I think the health from last year cannot be overstated as a factor in why he had a bit of a dip from that wide receiver 2 finish the season before. So if I'm going to take a guy to be a wide receiver 1, it's Chris Godwin. And I probably would have him in that, top 15 range, where Mike Evans rest of season, I might have him in that 15 to 20 range. But I think both of them are kind of comfortably in, that running back or wide receiver 2 range. What do you think though? Because I know you love you some Chris Godwin. And this is supposed to be an offense we attach to.
I just think it's going to be hard to predict even weekly, like especially if Gronk is a big thing too. And anecdotally, it just feels like whichever guy had a shit game the game before is the guy Brady and Arians game plan's hard for the week coming up. Like it's kind of frustrating, and it might be getting even tougher if they want to try and have some semblance of a run game as they did last week against the Patriots. I tweeted out that, so basically in week 1, we had multiple top 12 wide receivers from Tampa Bay. Week 2, we had a wide receiver 5, wide receiver 25. In week 3, we had a wide receiver 13, wide receiver 16 from Tampa Bay. And then this past week, we didn't have any Tampa Bay wide receiver player finish as a wide receiver 27 or better. So they all finished outside the top 28 wide receivers. And that correlated with the best rushing game, or the first decent rushing game as a team for the Buccaneers in week 4. But L_Neeners on Twitter pointed out, made a really good point that the weather was definitely a factor there. So it wasn't just that they're really trying to force a run game into this offense. I think it will be very much matchup based. But yeah, the weather definitely factored into that. But it could be a small sign that Leonard Fournette might be heating up a little bit. But yeah, I think these guys are pretty definitively wide receiver 2s. And do I want Jamar Chase? Do I want Adam Thielen over Mike Evans? Like, these are really difficult decisions, and you might look back and they all score within a point of each other in points per game at the end of the season.
Totally.
Stephon Diggs,
I can dig it.
Barely a top 20 wide receiver right now. But he is number 1 in the NFL in air yards, 4th in expected fantasy points per game, and he's seeing 28% of the target share in one of the most electric offenses, still over 20% of the market share in the red zone and inside the 10-yard line. Figures that could actually increase, in my opinion. So do you expect it to come together for Diggs, and how bold are you in that statement? Like, are you willing to give up bona fide top 12 prices to acquire him? Are you still rolling him out in DFS like a top 5 guy?
Yeah, I think I would give up the top 12 prices for him just for all that opportunity that you laid out, Ty. And like, this is the passing offense that we want, right? And Stephon Diggs came back with that big game this past week. I think he had seven catches for 114 yards, if I do recall. And I think it's going to continue for him. I think we're getting to a place where, Josh Allen and Brian Dable were kind of figuring out how they wanted to how they wanted to operate in this offense with Emmanuel Sanders being inserted. They didn't have Zach Moss for a bit, and now Zach Moss is back and he is a factor. Devin Singletary is still a factor. So I think they were kind of feeling out how they wanted to maybe take the offense to the next level after what they did last season. But I think Stephon Diggs is going to be the biggest piece in that puzzle. So I'm not worried for Stephon Diggs, and I would give up back end top 12 prices to get him as a top 5 wide receiver option for the rest of the season for sure.
Yeah, I'm totally in unison with you there. And I don't even think that has come at the expense of the upside of some of the ancillary guys like Emmanuel Sanders, like Cole Beasley, of course, even Dawson Knox, who's really coming on strong. And the only thing we might want to monitor, I think, is how big of a role can Zach Moss carve out in this offense, because the Bills have been so pass heavy and Zach Moss is really coming on strong himself. So, and some nice matchups coming up as well. But that you could also say that about the wide receivers for Buffalo. But yeah, I think Stephon Diggs should be valued as a bona fide wide receiver 1 rest of the season. I'd trade Justin Jefferson straight up for him. Yeah. Calvin Ridley, I think, is way tougher to answer. Or I think it takes a lot more, chin stroking because he's the wide receiver 22 right now, and he hasn't finished as a top 12 wide receiver yet this season. Only a top 24 wide receiver in 2 of 4 games. Is Calvin Ridley a wide receiver 1? Is he even wide receiver 2 at this point?
That one hurts. I think maybe back in wide receiver 2, but I think that is it, man. I think obviously it's just further cements that Cordell Patterson is the GOAT, but no. And I think it's the Arthur Smith effect has been far more than anybody anticipated. We still expected it to be one of those offenses that was going to put up a bunch of passing volume to make Calvin Ridley that, potential top 5 option for fantasy football, but he has not been even close to that. I think we've seen a lot. We've seen a lot of 12 personnel. We've seen Cordell Patterson be involved in a plethora of different ways. And we just haven't seen the volume come for Calvin Ridley on a really bad team. So, I think the passing volume for the team overall has come down, and I think that's played into it for Calvin Ridley. He's just not getting those looks. He's not getting the lucrative looks. He's not making it happen for himself after the catch. So I think we have to adjust big time on what Calvin Ridley is for fantasy football going forward this season, and probably in our dynasty leagues as well, which is super unfortunate, but it just is what it is. And if you're being water, you got to say that this guy is not going to be that top 12 option for you like you were hoping for.
Yeah, I think he is still a strong wide receiver 2, though. I think the people might jump the shark a little bit in the opposite direction when it comes to Ridley is 5th amongst wide receivers in targets. He's top 10 in air yards, catches, in expected fantasy points. And even though Ridley was, a top 12 wide receiver off the board in every fantasy draft heading into the season, we also did dislike the Falcons' strength of schedule in this new offense. We had an aging Matt Ryan, and we had some concerns, but the volume has been there, and I think it could be enough for him to deliver on some of the fantasy promises people made in the offseason. But yeah, I mean, give me the Cowboys wide receivers over Ridley rest this season. Yep. I still think he is a wide receiver 2, though. But I have him as a top 15 guy this week because they do get the Jets. That game is in London. And I think the Jets have actually been like a total run funnel now that I think about it. I think they've actually allowed the 3rd fewest points to the wide receiver position this year. But yeah, I think the move, so, now that I think of it, maybe the move is to have sold Calvin Ridley a week ago or this week when you can probably still get top 15 wide receiver prices for him. But I think the move might have been to buy him. I don't know. I don't know what to do with Calvin Ridley as a wide receiver 2.
It's hard. I think it's kind of a hold because anybody selling him is not going to sell him cheap. And then if, I don't know what I'm going to want to give up if I'm buying him. The guy's only got 1 finish inside the top 24, 0 20-point games so far this season. So it's been rough, but looking forward to that bounce back this week in London. So make sure you've got your teas and your crumpets ready because it's an early morning game for us West Coasters.
Yeah, no kidding. And just, this is a good point to levy on this episode. Like we talk a lot about buying and selling and trading and DFS and stuff. These are options, especially when it comes to trades and how you value players. Your record is really going to dictate how aggressive you're going to be and kind of the moves you want to make. We're talking about like Saquon for another big running back earlier. Like those are moves you only make if you're 0-4 or something, or if you're 4-0. And I think this is a perfect example with Calvin Ridley, with Stephon Diggs. Guys like these are the ones you go and overpay for if you're 0-4, and they're guys that or if you're 4-0 even, like they're guys that you want to be, they're more aggressive trades. That's for sure.
Totally. I'm going after these guys for sure if I have a winning record, because that bounce back could just cement me as that title contender. But I mean, if you're sitting at a 500 or one game under 500 record, then you really got to evaluate the rest of that roster. It's that's a really good point to think about, Ty, because it's not like we're not saying just any team should be going out and making these moves, because you really have to assess and be realistic with how your team is looking for the rest of the season. Like an injury depleted running back room is probably not the team you're going to want to go, like your fantasy roster. Sorry, if it's injury depleted, say you had an Akers and an ETN or something like that, or a Dobbins or whatever. If it's looking ugly, it's looking ugly, and you just got to be realistic with yourself on that one. The hard truths, right? The hard truths, man. It's my truth. Okay, Ty, I think that's what we got for tonight. We did have a couple of tight ends on the slate, but we are almost at $1.50 for this epi, and it was fun, man. Back in the lab, there's nowhere else I would rather be on a Wednesday night. So thank you for obliging as always. Just want to throw out the TrueNorthFFB.com. Go check it out. That site's looking pretty fresh. Shout out to Nate for all the work he's doing editing the articles. Dan made graphics as always for making us look pretty. Those guys are amazing. Paul for helping out on the website there as well. It's been really cool. So go check out TrueNorthFFB.com. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at TrueNorthFFB. This show is at TNFF Pod, and go back and check out that episode that we had last week with Chuba Hubbard, because that was super cool. Really cool opportunity for us, and hopefully something that we can maybe do a little bit more of in the future. Ty, good show tonight, my man. Any parting shots for the people?
No, it's all good. Check out Sons of DFS tomorrow night.
Thursday nights, folks, the Sons of DFS, and I think they might have a cool new wrinkle that they're adding to the show that I'm not going to spoil. A little unveiling of something cool that they're doing over at the SODFS, and then the point after on Friday night, we got you covered here at True North Fantasy Football. So make sure you subscribe, hit that notification button, smash that notification button. But yeah, until next week, I am Trav. That is Ty. Peace.